Hello National 5 biologists, this is Mr. Kinnear with a video lesson for National 5 Biology Cell Structure, which is Key Area 1.1, the start of our National 5 journey. Each of our 3 units in National 5 Biology, so cell biology, multicellular organisms and life on Earth, are each broken down into individual key areas. We may be able to cover one key area per video. Some of them are a bit bigger, so we'll have to do a couple of video lessons for them. Today, as I said, we're starting on 1.1 cell structure, which we'll cover in this video lesson. We'll then move on to transport across cell membranes, so we'll talk about the structure of a cell membrane and how molecules are transported in and out of cells. We'll also look at DNA structure and the production of proteins themselves, the different types of proteins, and also genetic engineering and respiration. Those are two things that you will have discussed at S3 biology last year. We're going to obviously add a bit more detail to your learning in National 5 biology this year. And at the start of each and every one of these videos, what we're going to do is break down key area into what you need to know. These are essentially the things that you need to know and could be tested on when it comes to your exam at the end of the year. So today it's cell ultrastructure and function. So effectively all the bits and pieces within cells, that's animal, plant, fungal and bacterial cells and what they do, and also just making a clear distinction about what makes up the cell walls of plant, fungal and bacterial cells. So these are my learning intentions for you guys today. We are doing a lot of recapping. Most of this should be familiar to you from your S2 Science and S3 Biology classes. There shouldn't be really anything that surprises you today. So we're starting with cells, the most basic unit of life. As you can see from the sizes there, 0.025 micrometers to 60 micrometers. A micrometer or micron is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. So these things are way too small to see without a microscope. And to give you an example, we're looking at the human female egg cell, which is the largest cell within the human body, and the smallest, the human sperm cell. Now those two cells are specialized cells. They have a particular job to do within the human body, as do most of your cells. But when we look at animal cells, plant cells, fungal cells and bacterial cells today, we're going to look at very simplified versions of those. So we start off with a simple animal cell. This diagram you should be familiar with. You'll have seen it in S2 Science and S3 Biology. And also those names, cytoplasm, nucleus, ribosome, mitochondria and cell membrane, should be familiar to you. Now you will be expected to be able to label a diagram or name cell structures from a diagram, and you'll also be expected to know the functions of each of those. We start off with cytoplasm. Now at National 5 level, effectively it is just an empty space within the cell. When you get to advanced higher, you'll start to look at what actually fills that space, but at the moment it's an empty space. Nucleus, you'll know from before, this contains your DNA and controls the cell activity. Ribosome is where proteins are made. Mitochondria is where you'll get your energy from cellular respiration, and cell membrane is the barrier. It controls what goes in and out of the cell. So just for clarity, here is the function of the organelles found in simple animal cells. The nucleus, as we know, is the location of DNA, but it also controls all the chemical reactions that happen within a cell. Cell membrane is something we're going to look at in more detail in a later lesson, but it's selectively permeable and it controls the entry and exit of substances. And that selectively permeable means that some substances get through very easily, others require assistance, but we'll look at that. Cytoplasm is not necessarily referred to as an organelle or a structure. It is, at the moment, referred to as pretty much an empty space, but it's where chemical reactions take place within a cell. The mitochondria are the site of energy release by respiration, and again, that process of respiration is something we're going to come back to later. As is the ribosome. It is the site of protein synthesis or protein production. That is very important later on in the unit as well. Just a bit more detail on the mitochondria. That's a singular version. Obviously, the plural is mitochondria. You're not going to get penalised if you write mitochondrion or mitochondria, whether you're talking about one or a number of them. But they are the power plants of the cell. They produce all the energy it needs for the cell to function, like this power plant in Torness. Now, we looked at an example earlier on of the sperm cell. It's a specialised cell whose job it is to swim to the egg. That requires a lot of energy. And obviously then that specialized cell of the sperm will contain lots of mitochondria. And we'll look at another couple of examples later on where a cell has jobs to do, where it requires lots of energy and therefore will contain lots of mitochondria. And that's something we need to know in National 5, or need to put together in our heads in National 5. And again, the ribosome is often referred to as the production plant or factory of the cell. It produces proteins, and that's really important to the function of the cells. And we're going to look at that in more detail when we come to DNA and the production of proteins. So next up is a plant cell. Again, plants are incredibly complex multicellular organisms. They can range from a small daisy to a giant redwood tree, one of the biggest organisms in the world. They have the vast majority of their cells specialised to do particular functions within a plant. But in this instance, like before, we're going to look at a very simple plant cell. You will notice that we've got three organelles that are exactly the same as you'd find in an animal cell: nucleus, cell membrane, and cytoplasm. So their functions are exactly the same as before. However, we've got three new ones: cell wall, which provides structure and protection to a plant cell; vacuole, which stores nutrients and water; and again chloroplast, which you very much should be familiar with from previous lessons within the science. Chloroplasts are what give plants their green colour, that green pigment chlorophyll, which is used for photosynthesis, the production of food from sunlight. So again, for clarity, here are the functions of the organelles found in a simple plant cell. So a cell wall, that rigid structure that provides support and protection. And a key bit of information that you need to be able to note is that the structural sugar that makes up a cell wall is called cellulose. And again, we'll come back to that in our notes about photosynthesis, and also noting the difference between the cell walls of plants and fungi. Chloroplasts we've come across before. They contain the green pigment called chlorophyll, which enables photosynthesis, which again obviously we'll come back to later. And the vacuole, a fluid-filled cavity, helps store water and nutrients. It also helps to support the plant. And as it says at the bottom there, plus all the organelles that are already found in an animal cell. So those are exactly the same functions as the animal cell we've discussed already. So next up are fungal cells. Now obviously this is a single-celled fungus. The most common example we're going to look at is yeast. Yeast comes up quite a bit in key area 1.6 when we're talking about respiration, and may also be coming up in your assignments later on in the year. As you can see, all of the cell structures here are familiar, nothing new within a fungal cell. There is one key thing for fungal cells, however, and that's the cell wall. As I previously stated, plant cells have a cell wall made from cellulose. Fungal cells, however, the cell walls are made from chitin or chitin. Now, this diagram shows you what that may look like. That's not something you guys need to know. The key thing is plant cell walls, cellulose; fungal cell walls, chitin or chitin. And last but not least, we're going to look at bacterial cells. Bacterial cells can come in all shapes and sizes, so this again is a very generic version. Again, there'll be things that are familiar with you: cell wall, ribosome, cytoplasm, and cell membrane. All things that we have seen before today. However, some new items. Capsule. As you can see, it is effectively the outer layer, provides further protection for bacterial cells. We have a plasmid, which is a ring of genetic material. And as you can see, the rest of the genetic material is just shoved in the middle there, willy-nilly. There is no nucleus within a bacterial cell. That is something that, again, you guys need to be able to understand and be able to point out. And last but not least, the flagellum, not present in all cells, but as you can see, it's kind of similar to the tail of a sperm cell, perhaps. And the flagellum provides the same function for a bacterial cell as a sperm cell would have, and that's motility. It gets it to move about. And again, here are the functions of those three brand new organelles or cell structures. Capsule providing protection, the plasmid, which is a ring of genetic material. It can carry useful information such as antibiotic resistance, and we'll talk about those again in key area 1.5 genetic engineering later on. And as I said, the flagellum, it provides movement. It's not present in all bacterial cells. And as before, we have all the other animal cell organelles except the nucleus. So again, guys, key thing to remember, if you're provided a diagram of a cell that doesn't have a nucleus, you should be able to identify, as of today, that that must be a bacterial cell. And that completes the learning for today. Today we've looked at the cells being the smallest unit of life, only visible using a microscope. And we've talked about the national 5 knowledge you need to know to be able to identify 4 types of cells. So that's animal, plant, fungal and bacterial. And we've looked at very generic and unspecialised types of cells. And we will look at specialised cells for both animals and plants later on in National 5. You should also be able to know and identify the function of each of the organelles present and relate that back to maybe diagrams that will be presented with in tests later on in the year. So hopefully that's been helpful to you. If you have any problems, let me know and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.